Hello, everyone. My name is Matt Arant. I'm the founder of Arant Academic Planning, which is a independent educational consultancy that specializes in both Division III, Ivy League, and Patriot League athletic recruitment, as well as boarding school admission. And this is part of a series that I've been facilitating over the past year on key topics in boarding school admission. And this session's a little bit different. In the past, I've done multi-school participation on topics such as financial aid, postgraduate years, the role of writing in the admission process. But for this evening session, we're looking at athletics and how it interacts with the admissions world. So athletic recruitment mixed with admissions itself. So I'm joined by a wide variety of folks from Northfield Mount Hermon School. And before we kind of dive into this process chronologically from narrowing down the boarding school choices on the part of the students, all the way until making the decision and then admission folks utilizing yield strategies to enroll those admitted students, I want to introduce our guests. So Claire, you want to kind of kick things off with the introduction?
Sure. My name is Claire Ward. I'm the Dean of Enrollment at Northfield Mount Hermon School. We have a team, I oversee a team of about 16 folks who are leading the admissions operations to enroll a school of 630 students, primarily boarding students, each year.
Awesome. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Shelton. I'm the interim athletic director here at Northfield Mount Hermon. I'm also our head boys varsity coach. And in terms of the coaches that I oversee, we have 19 varsity sports here that we'll be talking about strategies tonight with you all. So super excited to get this thing kicked off.
Hi, everyone. My name is Grace Rehnquist. I am the girls varsity basketball coach, and I'm also an associate dean of students. I've been at NMH for 11 years and have been on the admission side of it, the residential life side of it. So I have a good perspective on kind of the whole landscape that our student athletes experience during their time here.
Awesome. Hey everyone, I'm Trevor Heffel. This is my third year at Northfield Mount Hermon. I'm the boys lacrosse coach, and I also work with and for Claire in the admissions office right now. I come from 10 years previously in the college coaching world before this.
Hi, I'm Olivia. I'm a senior here at NMH. I'm from New Hampshire, but I originally grew up in Indiana, and I'm on the girls' basketball team.
Hi, I'm Jimmy. I'm a senior here at NMH. I'm part of the boys wrestling program and I'm from Ohio.
Okay, great. Thanks for introducing yourselves. So, I guess the point of this conversation is to show this process through three different levels, perspectives, right? So, at the top, you have the administrators, so the enrollment side, the athletic side, then you have the coaches, and then you have the student athletes. So, kind of kick things off chronologically for the coaches on the call here. How do you go about creating those recruitment lists, either through your own travel, inquiries? Kind of walk us through that process. Because me, I come from the college admission side where I was the athletics admission liaison, but I imagine it's a little bit different because not only the age of the students, but just the amount of students that are expressing interest in athletics. So I guess, Grace, can you kind of walk us through first what that process is like on your end?
Absolutely. Trevor and I have both been the athletic liaison at NMH, so we understand that role really intimately. For me, that landscape has changed over my time here, and I think that because the brand not only of NMH has continued to grow, both regionally in the US and kind of globally, but also the brand of our girls basketball program has grown. So when I first got here, that list was really created just by me. It was really me going out and evaluating kids on the road, spending my time and resources to bring students to North of Mount Hermon. I obviously still do that. I think in-person evaluation is something that you're going to hear a lot from the coaches tonight, us actually going out and seeing athletes, whether it be at a showcase, at tournaments, from word of mouth from our colleagues in the space about students that we need to see. But now there's a lot more kids coming in and inquiring to our admission office for our programs, girls basketball specifically, in my case. Another huge resource in building lists, right? list is going to be far larger than the number of student athletes I actually enroll to come play for me, because there's a wide range of boarding schools, there's a wide range of needs for families and best fits, and that's what really we're looking for here at NMH, is best fit for the student athlete, for their family, not only athletically but social, emotionally, academically as well. But the internet has really exploded in that way. I'm sure Trevor's going to say the same thing. You open up Twitter, or I guess X or Instagram, and there are students who have specified bios, specified pages just for their athletic recruitment. And that is a really awesome way to get names out there, especially out of region, right? We don't have the ability to hop on a plane and go to Austin for a weekend to go to a tournament or a showcase, but we do have the ability to evaluate these kids from a distance with the use of things like social media.
Yeah, I can jump on that a little bit too. I kind of see it in three ways that I build my list, and Grace did a really good job of communicating pretty much all those. But from my perspective, it's one, you got the marketing side, right? Like where, we're working as hard as we can to create and promote a brand, and it's primarily through social media, and then also using that social media to recruit kids, like Grace was talking about, being able to connect with them in ways that they're seeing your program and understanding it, and both understanding it at the school at the same time. That's where inquiries come in as well, right? Is, our ability to market our programs and create a product of our programs that people see. The second piece is, there's the hard work of hitting the road, right? Like it's still really important to see as many kids as possible and create that large list of evaluation that you see on the road, whether it's showcases, tournaments, um, you know, and that's probably a little bit less of a yield, but that's still a really important part. And then the third one is like those personal connections, right? Coaches are working in club programs, coaches are connecting with college coaches, coaches are connecting with club coaches, they're connecting with high school coaches who are willing to send postgraduates, and that's maybe a more higher yield process when you can make those type of connections and have yourself established in the world that creates those connections.
So a quick kind of follow-up. So both your sports have varying roster sizes, right? So basketball is traditionally a lot smaller than lacrosse or your footballs or your track and field. So how does that come into play when with Grace when you have a much smaller expected recruiting class in contrast to maybe lacrosse, or if a school has football or track and field, swimming, those larger rosters?
That's a great question. I really consider myself the head of the girls basketball program. Like, it's important for me to make sure that even if there's a young female athlete who isn't Olivia, who's going to immediately come in and impact the varsity basketball program, that we have opportunities for them to consider their athletic careers here at NMH, because we have a thriving JV and thirds program as well. So my list is going to be large because there are developmental kids that I will go after, talk to,
It's not like
talk.
college where you have like three or four girls maximum. You have multiple teams to choose from. That's
Mhm.
probably the main difference, right?
Exactly. And I have some flexibility in my roster size. There can be times when I'm as lean as mean and at 12, but also times where I'll carry a bigger roster of 15, 16, 17, because that is what the admission cycle needed that year. That is what my team needed that year. Carrying some younger kids who want to work their way up through our program. So it really does vary on my graduating class and my needs from that class, but also kind of the needs of the school, right? It is part of my due diligence to make sure that we're able to have a JV and thirds program as well. And I always say this, and Olivia's heard me say this 100 times: the more girls that are playing basketball at NMH, the better it is. And that's regardless of level. So my list could be really long, but maybe the varsity athletes on that list are 4, 5, or 6.
Yeah.
But I still want to matriculate great young people who want to contribute to all levels of our sports programs.
Yeah, I think the thing that you see from programs well established is that idea of depth and teams being able to have a really great structure that young students want to come in and be a part of. That the structure is something that they're going to come in, they're going to get better, they're going to love the sport, right? And you're creating that, right? It's our job as the head coach to create that structure, whether it's through programming, whether it's through, finding the right people, whether it's for advocating to get things that, we need for our program, or just the hard work of waking up in the mornings on, out of season, right? Like those are the things it takes to make the experience great. And, that's I think part of what we're looking to do for these students. And that's what helps bring in, really great, well-established programs that have great depth and everyone who comes in and wants to be a part of that program, you have somewhere for them.
Okay, great. So shifting gears kind of slightly to the students on this call. So if you kind of could walk us through your individual kind of journeys on selecting a school from athletics. And I think Olivia mentioned you're from New Hampshire, but before that you're Indiana. And then Jimmy, you're from Ohio. So states that aren't exactly a easy commute to Western, central-ish Massachusetts. So what kind of drew y'all specifically to NMH and kind of how it figured in with your own journey to picking a boarding school for yourself?
Yeah, so for me, like boarding school wasn't a huge like thing in the Midwest.
Hmm.
Like it wasn't super popular. So when I moved out to New Hampshire, it was very like new to me. But once I kind of figured out that I wanted to play basketball at a high level, I was introduced to this boarding school process. And I think what set apart like NMH was like the balance between like to play at the highest level basketball, but also like the high academics, and like that's something that would challenge me in the classroom. And I think like that was something that intrigued me a lot. And like as I continue to visit back to NMH like during my process, um, the culture and just like welcoming community here like was something that I wanted to be a part of. And I think that set NMH like apart from a lot of other schools that I was kind of looking into.
Good, great.
Yeah, I had a very similar experience to Olivia, coming from the Midwest where prep schools really aren't that common. Like a lot of kids don't really choose the prep route. But something that Grace and Trevor both were talking about was social media. So our wrestling coach actually reached out to me on social media, and that's how we began the process, the recruiting process. And NMH was really the only boarding school that was recruiting me. Like once again, like Olivia said, wasn't really that common. So I didn't really have my mind set on going to a prep school, but our coach did a great job of explaining the opportunity that it was, the great high academics and also the great program that he has, built. And it seemed like the right fit for me. And I'm glad I made the choice. And it was a really great opportunity. Came out here, got to see what everybody was about and see what the program was about, see the amazing community, amazing views. Like it's a great place to be.
And did y'all both start as what year did y'all come into? You come in ninth or in the middle of high school? Or are you PGs? Like what is your, I guess, current, like what was your, I guess, entrance year to NMH?
I came in as a freshman.
Okay.
Yeah, I came in as a repeat sophomore, so
Okay.
right in the middle. Yeah.
And we actually just had a panel about PG years and reclassifying. So I talked to actually a couple other boarding schools about that process. So if people on this call are familiar with that process, even though where I'm at down in Texas, reclassifying, they have no idea what I'm talking about. So luckily the people that are viewing this have a bigger sense of that process because they're used to it themselves. So now kind of thinking about the more higher level kind of back and forth, right? So me coming from the college side, I was the athletics admission liaison, which meant I was literally an intermediary between the dean, not really the VP, they're doing other stuff a bit more above my pay grade, as well as the athletic directors, senior women administrators, compliance folks, right? That. So I kind of had to weave between those two offices. And tonight we have those embodiments right here with athletics and enrollment management. So can you kind of walk us through what's going on, I guess, behind the scenes leading up to the application deadlines for those recruited student athletes, whether it's a back and forth with coaches, other admission folks, kind of share with us what that's like leading up to that application deadline.
Claire, did you want me to kick this one off?
Kick it off.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, Matt, so that's a great question. I think that the most integral part for the athletic director in this process is communicating effectively with our coaches on what the needs assessment is. And as we start each season, I have meetings with all of our coaches and we go over that needs assessment, like where the roster is currently, what they're looking forward to this season, where do they see strengths, where do they see weaknesses. And not only does that allow me to kind of evaluate the current season they're going through, but it also allows us to set the table for what's going to happen in the recruiting process. So that needs assessment kind of flows into what we call a priority list. And so each kid kind of coming up to the admission cycle in January will submit a priority list on, what they need. If they need a center, if they need a goalie, if they need a point guard, if they need someone that can shoot it as well as Olivia, whatever that might be, right? You put that on that priority list, and then that allows the admissions officers, while they're reading files, to notate like this is going to be a necessity for this sport. I think another one of my roles is for me to be able to work with the athletics liaison directly and make sure that I highlight here are some programs that are in dire need, right? They need more than the normal. Or here are some programs that are actually coming back with some really, really strong rosters. One of the new things I'm going to implement this year is the notion of a depth chart, actually. So taking that priority list theory and kind of extrapolating it out to now we can actually give a roadmap to the admissions officers while they're reading files. So they see each individual coach's position, and then they have the individual depth chart within that position. So if it's lacrosse and and Trevor needs an attack, he's going to have a list of 4 or 5 or 6 attack. This is my first attack. This is my second, all the way down to as many as he wants to put on that list. And so once we get all of those positions in front of the admissions office, they can really make those assessments as they're reading files and saying, okay, this file is a little bit stronger. Maybe his third person is the strongest file out of all of them. And anyway, I think it's going to be able to paint the picture a little bit better and easier for our admissions department. And then the last thing I'll say, and I'll hand it over to Claire, that's a really integral part of our process is the pre-read process. And here at NMH, that really does focus mostly on, I would say, financial aid. Claire's team does a great job communicating effectively with our coaches on where families are in the financial aid process and giving us kind of an overview of what that might look like. We don't get specific numbers, but giving us a range so our coaches can communicate effectively with our the kids that we're recruiting. I'll hand the rest over to Claire, fill in the gaps.
Yeah, and I think this is the beginning of what becomes a really awesome dance, a collaborative dance between admissions and athletics, because at the end of the day, we all want the very same thing, which is successful athletics program with mission appropriate kids. So there's a lot of back and forth. And what I think is amazing to watch for me is the amount of communication that coaches are doing, not only with the prospective athletes, but with their families. In many cases, there's a lot of conversation. These are the first kids to go to independent school or boarding school. So there's a lot of discussion around what does boarding school actually mean? And is this for us as a family? And then being that bridge that Michael is referring to with regard to the financial piece of the whole thing, because it is obviously a huge commitment, and that part can be overwhelming if you don't have a guide along the way. And so the coaches play a really great role in advocating for the family in the process, advocating for the admissions office and the financial aid process with the family as well. So there's a lot of really amazing back and forth. And the only last piece I would mention is that if for any reason the coach is picking up that there's some hole in the file in some sort of way, then there's just sort of proactive communication between the coach and the admissions office around, hey, let's not wait till we get to file reading. Let's see if we can fill this gap a little bit. Is there an explanation about why the student transferred schools, or there's a missing grade, or a lot of absences one year, whatever the thing is, there's a lot of proactive work that can be done to kind of document that and provide some additional context for that so that we're not coming at that discussion by the time we're reading the file for the first time.
So I guess kind of related to that, Claire, I think Michael kind of mentioned it about information that's shared from the coaches to admissions and kind of how like the depth chart, right? So going back to pre-reads, when I was doing pre-reads at Franklin and Marshall, the savvier coaches would give me the priorities as well as by position as well as overall. So I wouldn't get 35 attacking forwards at one time. And oh, they're all good, but you don't have enough of a field to have that many attackers,
Mhm.
right? So the savvier coaches say, okay, here's our 1 through 10 or whatever. Here's our top post. Here's our guards. So when I did that, and if the academics weren't, they were still fine, but they weren't a clear-cut admissible student, that's when the context comes in. So I guess, Claire, you kind of maybe talk a little bit more about the use of that athletic specific information in regard to the rest of the reading process as well as the committee process itself. How does that kind of work? Is it something that's present throughout, or is it more confined to the actual reading of the
No,
file?
I feel like it's present throughout. I feel like if Trevor's got a priority athlete, I know who that athlete is pretty early on in the process if Trevor's doing his job. And also, just the process that Michael just described, there's so much front end work that the athletic department is doing to actually understand what the depth chart of the teams are, what the
You're not being
priority.
blindsided when you're, oh, by the
I
way,
am never.
here are my recruits.
Yeah.
Go and see what you can
No,
do
no,
for
no,
us.
no,
Yeah.
no. And I think to whatever extent possible, there is a little direct advocacy from the coach themselves.
Mhm.
That can sometimes happen. A little bit of we're getting closer and closer to the acceptance deadline. How about now? How about now? A little bit of that. But by and large, a lot of that advocacy happens in layers ahead of time. So layers from the athletic director, layers from the athletic liaison, a role that both Trevor and Grace have played, layers from the admission counselor. I mean, we've kind of left them out of this
Mhm.
piece too. The admissions counselor is trying to win as well here, and to make sure that we're recruiting mission appropriate kids and athletes to the whole thing. So I would just say that I don't feel like I get caught off guard as a dean. I do think people can get creative. Coaches can get creative. And I say that like with love in my heart because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. Like, I just want to keep pointing back to that thing. So even when coaches get creative about catching a conversation or catching an edge on something, it really is welcome from that standpoint because what we're doing is advocating for kids. So
Mhm.
at the end of the day, that's what we're all here for.
So you mentioned kind of creativity, right? And this kind of came through my mind as you mentioned that. I was thinking about multi-sport
Yes.
athletes, right? Is that kind of what you would think about? Oh, this could be a football player, but they can also run hurdles or they can high jump. And so you have one spot, but you take care of two sports, right? So is that where you kind of, I saw it a lot in college with football players, oh, that run track, or
Yeah.
rowers, and it wasn't that common, but the lacrosse field hockey made the most sense because it was literally field hockey in the fall, lacrosse in the spring, not too different in terms of the sport. So you saw a lot of back and forth there. Is that what you kind of meant about those
I mean,
creative
that's one
guys?
that's one example. I mean, we definitely, when we're reviewing files and evaluating prospective athletes, if an athlete is going to make an impact, a bigger impact by being a multi-sport athlete, or I would just go out there and say not just multi-sport, but if they happen to be a basketball player who's also a violinist,
Yeah.
whatever they're going to contribute to the
Multi-hyphenate,
community.
like for
Yeah,
activities.
in ways that make an impact, in addition to needing to be, I mean, in a high school setting in a dormitory, we're really trying to do a lot of positive social engineering as well, because that's developmentally appropriate. So, a really glue kid who can make a significant impact on the campus is a really big deal to us.
One final thought before we kind of go to the next topic. What about kind of geographic hooks, right? So I mentioned I'm based here in Texas. It's the state everyone wants their kids to come from because everyone's moving down here in other parts of the South. And so I was wondering, how does that come into play in terms of not only the athletic side, but oh, by the way, there is a really smart kid from Austin but goes to a high school that's really good at sports. If we get this one kid, maybe they're in
Oh, yeah.
drama or
Oh,
performing
yeah.
arts, that might open up a pipeline to the entire high school, which happens to include really high quality athletics. How does that kind of fit in within, I guess, your overall recruitment strategy? Is something that just kind of pops up
Well, I'll
as
start from the overall recruitment strategy, but I'm guessing the athletics folks on here, the coaches probably understand that pipeline in terms of specific programs in certain locations. But there's no question from my standpoint, we're trying to put together a community of diverse perspectives, diverse geography. We happen to be a community that obviously, we're an international community. We have almost 60 countries represented at the school, with about a third of the school, maybe a little less than a third of the school, 27%, I think we are international. So we're trying to really put together a very diverse population. So yes, we're always trying to chase that next pipeline. And I'm guessing from the coach's perspective, you all are chasing that with certain programs. Am I right?
Yeah, I think Matt, you alluded to this, kind of the saying like it just takes one.
Mhm.
So for example, I brought in a girl from Chapel Hill, North Carolina or this past year, and now I have 5 kids from her area who are interested just because she's speaking, she's spreading the truth about NMH and about the experience.
Exponential growth,
Um,
right?
exactly. And it really like we want our inquiries to go up because that means our applications will go up and that means that we'll have a more competitive yield, right? All that's a domino effect of the admission process. So yeah, getting that one kid from that one area that is helpful to my program will also probably mutually benefit our admissions process and the overall makeup of our student body.
Yeah, I see it from a not just regional perspective, but like a club perspective as well. Like if you can get yourself into a club organization, right, then you can go back to that with I love how you said that, Grace, where they know the truth about NMH. Um, you can go back to that, and that's truth has spread a little bit. So you know the well you can go back to, and where there's some backing to the understanding of what NMH is about. And then every year I like to reevaluate what kind of the next region or club might be. Like that's part of my process, trying to get an understanding of where to bring those inquiries up specifically. And that's like a year by year change.
Okay, great. So now kind of wrapping, I guess, in the final third of the timeline, right? We talked about the expiration, now we're in application, and now we're at decision release, right? So for the student athletes on the call, what kind of went into making that final choice, right? So I think you mentioned that we're unfamiliar with the boarding school process prior to interaction with the coaches, but now you were admitted to NMH and other schools perhaps. What was that own process like for you to say, okay, here I am and here's where I want to go and let's go ahead and get ready for the following year.
For me, I think like one important thing was like I revisited a lot of the schools that I went to. Like either like on my own time or like on revisit days. I think taking advantage of that opportunity and kind of seeing like more what it looks like in a day to day really gave me like a lot of insight on different schools. And I think for NMH, like I said earlier, just the community here and just like the culture not only the basketball team had, but the overall campus like kind of really just brought my attention. And I think I really just wanted to take the opportunity at NMH, and that's kind of what helped me like make my decision.
For me, I was a late applicant, so I only got to visit the school one time, and I believe it was late July. So I kind of had to make a pretty rushed decision, and a lot of that came from help from the coaches here at NMH, but also my family. A lot of discussions with my coaches back home, my family members, and the coaches here at NMH to really, dig deep and truly know that this would be the right decision for me. So those conversations, they had to be pretty abrupt. I had to make a decision pretty quickly, but I feel like there was, in the end, the best decision for me.
So now kind of flipping that process from the admissions top down kind of perspective, right? So yield is a huge buzzword, higher ed especially, and then going down to independent day as well as boarding school. So Claire, I was wondering what was how does yield kind of fit in within athletics, like recruit student athletes? And do you have any specific examples of maybe programming that you use for athletes only, or is it encompassing the entire admitted class each year?
Really good questions. Obviously, yield matters a lot in this whole thing. When I think about athletics in particular, I think our athletics yield strategy relies very heavily on the coaches, for better or for worse, because it really is the coach that has gotten the family up to the line. I think to some extent, and I'm interested to hear the students weigh in on to what extent they feel like they're making a decision to join a coach as much as a
Hmm.
school or a program, right? Do I feel safe or that this coach is going to help me develop in my sport? So I think for us, we have lots of great yield strategies. Olivia's mentioning the revisit days that we have. We have multiple revisit days that get targeted for the most part by age and stage. So we have different yield strategies for PGs than we do for our ninth graders, for example. But so all of those yield strategies are in place for all kids. I think the differentiated experience for the athletes is the relationship with the coach. But I'm happy to
Hmm.
hear the coaches or the students weigh in on that.
Yeah.
Olivia, no pressure to talk about how important and influential your coach is, but let's kick it to you.
Um, well, I think majority of like going into the process, like a lot of like recruiting events, was where like I first connected with Grace. And I think like from there we like continued to communicate just either about like what NMH had to offer or just like updates on how like my classes were going or just AAU, like other basketball teams. But then I think once I kind of finally like got accepted and like it was like that period where like, I had to make a decision, I think kind of continuing that communication and like really seeing the relationship that like I had built and could continue to build throughout my time here. I think that kind of was like safe for me to say that I was something like I could trust and like see like her not only as a coach but like an important like someone I could look up to on campus. And I think that's kind of helped me a lot as my time like has gone on here.
That's a pretty good answer.
Yeah.
Um, but to speak it from the coaching perspective, one, like I'm a very relationship driven coach. So my time spent in that kind of yield process is not just if they don't understand what our basketball program could give them, I'm just falling short in general. But I really want them to understand the relationship and the return on investment they're going to get from their whole entire experience at NMH. It is a lot. Yes, Olivia identifies very heavily as a basketball player. She is going off to college to continue to pursue that passion, but she is a much more well-rounded human being than that and has grown a tremendous amount over the 4 years because she believed in the return on investment that she could get here. And I have, when I go to admissions and I give them my depth chart and I give them my priority list, I'm telling Claire, like, give me a chance on these kids. Let me show you that I can yield them and the impact they're going to have here. And it's incumbent upon me to build that trust with admissions to show that I'm not just going to bring you these 25 kids and say, yeah, we'll see what happens, right? Building that relationship, saying, I am a yield agent. I'm true to my word. I can bring in kids. They're going to have impact in more than one space. We talked about the multi-sport, the multi-dimensional kid. Just talking about Olivia, she's played 3 varsity sports here throughout her time. She's an all-star in softball, not only in basketball. She's been a resident leader for 2 years, a 3-year captain. Jimmy is also on the varsity track team. He's also been a 2-year resident leader. Like, they're doing way more things than just being elite at their sport, which they both are. So it's incumbent upon the coaches that I'm not just bringing a basketball player, right?
Yeah.
Olivia Fleming's not going to be a graduate of NMH girls varsity basketball. She's going to be a graduate of Northfield Mount Hermon. And that impact and what I'm saying I'm bringing to the table is important to continue the really important dynamic relationship between admissions and athletics.
Yeah, you brought up the kind of the word kind of tweaking, right? You're a student that happens to play the sport as opposed to the athlete that happens to go to the school, right? So when I talk to students and families looking to play college sports, I oftentimes tell them the first thing that they need to know is their applications can be reviewed by and large by someone who could care less about athletics, right? So the last thing you want to do is have an application that just screams sports, 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 just kind of beats you over the head with it. So you want to have that multifaceted application, right? Because especially that's why I picked D3. Like D1, go, that's a great option for folks. Go ahead and do that. But for those families that are trying to figure out, okay, I like playing sports, but I also like to do X, Y, and Z. You want to make that come through in your application for college. And I imagine it's pretty similar through the application for boarding and day schools
I
student
think
too.
it speaks to what Claire says earlier. They know who our priority athletes are, right? If we're
Yeah.
doing our job, they know that. So Olivia's application could have said nothing about her basketball,
Yeah.
and they would have been able to rate her all the same in her athletics because of the information that Michael's
Mhm.
office is bringing, that I am bringing. But it's really about showcasing, okay, great. Yes, I know you're a basketball player, but like, what else are you going to be? Because the NMH experience is so much more broad and vast and in depth than just the athletics program. We talk a lot about in our program human first, student second, athlete third. And I think that is also our holistic approach to our admission. Claire has said many times mission aligned students, right? And someone who comes in and says, I'm a basketball player with a capital B is not going to be an mission line student. So it's incumbent
Mhm.
upon me and Trevor and Michael as coaches to go out into our communities and out into our recruiting processes and find those kids that can both impact my team greatly, but also impact this community in really important ways.
Yeah, I want to chime in if that's okay, and just add on something that Jimmy said earlier about his decision-making process and how he went home and noticed that he talked about his family, he talked about his friends, he talked about his coaches, he talked about his personal circle. And so my theory that I hope to impart on our coaches this cycle is to really make sure that you have touch points in each one of your recruited athlete circle, right? It's not just the kid, it's not just the family, it's their club coach, it's their high school coach, right? It could be their uncle or their grandparent, right? Each kid's going to have a different circle. And I think if you can have those personal touches with everybody in that circle, hot take, you should pretty much know whether or not you're going to yield the kid before, those decisions come back, right? If you really have a good pulse on that student athlete. And so I think that just being able to have those early, loud, and continuous conversations is really key to the yield and making sure that you touch everybody in their circle.
The thing that occurs to me too is that we're still a team. So, I mean, I say that we rely heavily on the coaches, but the reality is, if, for example, the coach is feeling like we need another touch point, we need a different touch point, now we need the orchestra director to touch, like whatever the thing is, we're going to come back at that because the yield matters. Once we're this far down the pipeline, it's not just the yield for the numbers. We've already begun to see this kid on our campus. We've already begun to picture this kid on our teams. So yes, we want to win, but not for the numbers. We want to win for the community.
You're doing kind of like an internal projection, right? Okay, here's my mind's eye. I can see, okay, they're doing this and that. And
Yep.
then, oh, maybe 3 years from now, they are getting ready to take that next step, whether it's athletics or just going to a really strong school that fits their needs, right? You're forecasting it out years in advance, right? You might not think about it, but it comes into play when you're going through that that process when you're reading those files too.
Yeah, and a
Yeah.
lot of those forecasts, Matt, are like leadership. I think, you know, if I'm putting on my admissions hat, like you're reading these files and thinking how much these kids are going to impact your community from a leadership standpoint. And again, both Olivia and Jimmy are perfect examples about how they've been 2-year resident leaders, right? Like that's such a huge connection point in our community that I think doesn't fall short when we were reading their files however many years ago they applied. And I think that that's really awesome thing, that it's not like how many wrestling matches is Jimmy going to win, how many, you know, MVPs is Olivia going to get on the court. It's really about like how she's really and how he is really going to impact our community other ways outside of the sport that they choose, which I think is a special thing about the sporting school experience.
Yeah. So I'd like to give the last word to the students on the screen here. If think about people watching this, that they're students or families that are thinking about this process. They could be from Connecticut where you throw a rock and you hit 10 boarding schools, right? Or you could be where I am and there's really maybe a one or two and it's not even close to the level of options available instantaneously to students. So for those potential viewers of this conversation, what advice do you have for them about going through this process, whether it's athletics specifically or just making a choice on attending a school that's far from where you even live, right? So I guess Olivia or Jimmy, what kind of advice do you have for those students or families considering boarding school, but even considering boarding school with the athletics focus as well?
Yeah, some advice I would give was would definitely be take the risk. You know, coming from Ohio, you know, I had people tell me that, you know, this might not be the best decision, but you know, I went with my gut. And I'm glad I did that because, you know, you're gonna make new friends, you're gonna make new connections, and you know, the opportunities that boarding schools will give you are ones that will, you know, change your life. So yeah, I'd say take the risk and it'll definitely pay off if you're willing to put in the work.
Yeah, I agree with Jimmy. I don't think like you're ever gonna be 100%. And I think like that was kind of something I felt, as I never was like 100% like certain. But I, like you said, like take the risk and just be open to the opportunities like presented in front of you. And like don't take anything for granted while you're there.
Great. So on behalf of these multiple folks from Northfield Mount Hermon, this is Matt Arant. Thanks again for tuning into the session and hope this was informative. Thank you.
Thank you.